You didn't lose your strength. You didn't lose your faith. And you didn't lose yourself. What you lost was the version of you that could no longer carry what Allah was preparing. There is a reason you became quieter, a reason your patience changed, a reason your old motivation stopped working. You thought something inside you broke, but according to Ibn Arabi, Allah does not break the ones He chooses. He rewrites them. That rewriting feels like loss before it feels like clarity. It feels like delay before it feels like alignment. And it feels unnecessary until you realize it was essential. If you've been wondering why this phase hurt so deeply, why it stripped you instead of lifting you, why it changed you in ways you can't undo, stay with me, because you did not break. This was necessary, and once you understand why, you will never see your struggle the same way again. 1. Breaking is loud, rewriting is silent. One of the greatest misunderstandings people have about hardship is this. They think transformation should feel dramatic, explosive, obvious. They expect collapse to look like chaos. But Ibn Arabi teaches something far more unsettling and far more beautiful. When Allah breaks something, the world hears it. When Allah rewrites someone, only the soul notices. Breaking is loud. It creates noise, panic, exposure, and public damage. Rewriting is silent. It removes sound from your life first. Think carefully about what happened to you. You didn't explode. You didn't lose control. You didn't fall apart in front of everyone. Instead, something quieter happened. You withdrew. You became selective with your words. You stopped reacting the way you used to. You felt tired of explaining yourself. You no longer had energy for things that once mattered deeply, and that scared you. You thought, why don't I feel like myself anymore? You thought something precious inside you had cracked. But Ibn Arabi would say, if you had broken, you would have scattered. Broken things fall apart. They leak outward. They demand attention. But you didn't scatter, you slowed. Allah lowered the volume of your life, because rewriting cannot happen in noise. Ink needs stillness. Meaning needs space. This is why distractions faded. This is why conversations felt empty. This is why even joy felt muted for a while. Not because life lost color, but because Allah removed excess so He could redraw the essential lines. Rewriting requires pause, and pause feels unbearable to the ego. The ego panics when movement stops. It mistakes silence for failure. It mistakes stillness for weakness. But the soul understands. The soul knows that Allah never edits loudly. He edits precisely. He doesn't announce the change. He doesn't explain it in advance. He simply begins removing what no longer belongs in the next version of you. That's why this phase confused you. You weren't falling apart. You were being rearranged. Your old reactions didn't fit anymore. Your old desires felt heavy. Your old identity started dissolving. And dissolution feels like death, but only to what was temporary. This is the first sign that you did not break. You became quieter, not chaotic, more inward, not destructive, more observant, not reckless. Allah was not tearing you down. He was clearing space. Because rewriting is not destruction. It is preparation disguised as silence. And silence, when it comes from Allah, is never empty. It is full of intention. 2. Allah removes what no longer matches your destiny. One of the most painful moments in a person's life is not loss itself, but the confusion that comes with it. You look at what is leaving and you ask, why now? You try to reason with it, to hold it together, to make it make sense. But Ibn Arabi teaches that when Allah intends elevation, He first creates incompatibility. Things that once felt natural begin to feel heavy. people you once felt connected to begin to feel distant. Paths you once chased with certainty begin to feel empty. Nothing is necessarily wrong with them. They simply no longer fit who you are becoming. This is why the loss felt personal. It wasn't random. It wasn't punishment. It wasn't failure. It was alignment. Allah does not remove something from your life without first knowing what He is replacing it with. But He never shows you the replacement first, because if He did, you would cling to the old while trying to grab the new. So He loosens your grip instead. This is where the pain comes from. You didn't lose because you were weak. You lost because you were growing. Your soul outpaced your surroundings. Your inner direction changed before your outer life caught up, and that gap created discomfort. Ibn Arabi explains that destiny has a rhythm. When something falls out of rhythm, Allah either corrects it or removes it. In your case, removal was mercy. What left you was not stolen. It was released. And the reason it hurt so deeply is because part of your identity was still attached to it. Allah was not punishing you for that attachment. He was freeing you from it. That is why holding on became exhausting. When Allah begins rewriting a person, He makes attachment uncomfortable. He drains joy from what is no longer aligned, so the soul does not mistake familiarity for destiny. This phase feels cruel to the ego, but it is compassionate to the soul, because Allah does not elevate people by adding endlessly. He elevates them by refining. You were not stripped. You were prepared. 3. Confusion is a sign of transition, not failure. There is a moment in a person's life that feels more unsettling than pain itself. It is not loss. It is not hardship. It is the moment when clarity disappears, when you can no longer explain yourself to yourself. When the inner compass that once guided you suddenly stops pointing anywhere familiar. You wake up and realize you no longer want what you used to want. You try to return to old motivations, but they feel hollow. You search for direction, but every answer feels incomplete. This is the moment most people panic. They assume something has gone wrong. But according to Ibn Arabi, this moment does not appear when someone is failing. It appears when someone is crossing from one state of being into another. Ibn Arabi teaches that Allah does not move a servant abruptly from one identity into the next. Between the old self and the new self, Allah creates a space. That space feels like confusion, uncertainty, and loss of direction, but it is not emptiness. It is transition. You were not lost. You were between versions. The old version of you had already begun dissolving. The habits, the reactions, the ambitions, the attachments that once defined you were quietly losing their grip, but the new version had not yet fully formed. And standing between those two realities feels unbearable to the ego. The ego hates gaps. It needs labels. It needs certainty. It needs a story it can control. So when clarity disappears, the ego immediately labels the experience as failure. But Ibn Arabi explains that Allah removes certainty before He reveals truth. Because certainty can be false, but truth requires humility. And humility can only grow when answers are temporarily withheld. This is why Allah does not rush clarity during this phase. If Allah showed you the next chapter too early, you would grab it with expectation instead of trust. You would rush into it carrying fear, ego, and old patterns. So Allah waits until your need for control weakens. That waiting feels like confusion. This is why thinking harder did not help you. This is why overanalyzing only made you more exhausted. You were trying to solve spiritually what was happening existentially. Ibn Arabi teaches that some transitions are not meant to be understood, they are meant to be lived through. During this phase, Allah removes false certainty. You realize that the confidence you once had was built on things that were temporary. Approval, outcomes, identity, achievement. control. When those supports are removed, confusion rushes in. But confusion is not the enemy. Confusion is the space where truth has not yet taken shape. This is why prayer felt different. This is why motivation felt inconsistent. This is why silence felt heavier than noise. Allah was teaching you how to stand without guarantees. Because faith that only survives clarity is fragile, but faith that survives confusion becomes anchored. Ibn Arabi says that Allah tests servants not by hardship alone, but by removing familiarity. When nothing feels familiar anymore, the soul is forced to rely directly on Allah rather than on understanding. This is the moment when many people turn back. They rush to recreate old certainty just to escape discomfort. But you did not do that. You stayed, even when you didn't understand, even when answers did not come, even when direction felt absent. That is not failure. That is endurance. And endurance, during confusion, is one of the highest forms of trust. You did not lose your way. You lost the illusion that you were ever in control of it. And that loss was necessary. Because the next version of you cannot be built on false certainty. It must be built on surrender. That is why confusion appeared, not to break you, but to loosen what needed to fall away before the rewriting could continue. 4. This phase felt necessary because it was. There is a particular kind of pain that feels intentional, not random, not chaotic. It doesn't feel like an accident. It feels placed, measured, almost deliberate, and that is what disturbed you the most. You kept asking yourself, why did it have to happen this way? Why this timing? Why this intensity? Why did it touch the exact places that already felt fragile? According to Ibn Arabi, when Allah prepares a servant for a higher responsibility, He does not test them randomly. He tests them precisely. This phase did not feel unnecessary, because it wasn't. Ibn Arabi teaches that Allah does not shape souls the way humans shape plans. Humans add, decorate, expand. Allah refines. He removes. He presses. He exposes what cannot remain. What you experienced was not excess hardship. It was exact pressure. If the pain had been lighter, it would not have reached the depth it needed to reach. If it had been heavier, it might have broken something that needed to remain intact. So Allah calibrated it. That is why this phase felt personal. That is why it targeted your attachments, your expectations, your sense of identity. That is why it didn't just affect your circumstances, but your inner world. This was not about fixing behavior. It was about reshaping orientation. You were not being punished. You were being aligned. Ibn Arabi explains that destiny does not unfold smoothly for those who are meant to carry awareness. Ease can preserve illusions. Difficulty exposes truth. And exposure, though painful, is mercy. This phase forced you to confront things you could no longer ignore. Motives you thought were pure. Attachments you thought were harmless. Expectations you thought were faith. And that confrontation felt like loss. But what you lost was not essential. What was essential survived. This is how you know the phase was necessary. The things that left could not go with you into what comes next. The things that remained are the foundation of your next chapter. Allah does not remove what you need. He removes what you depend on instead of Him. That dependency is subtle. It hides inside good things. It disguises itself as effort, ambition, even spirituality. But when it becomes an obstacle to surrender, Allah intervenes. That intervention hurts. Because surrender is not passive. It is active unlearning. During this phase, you were unlearning control, certainty, timing, expectation, and unlearning feels like loss before it feels like freedom. This is why you tried to resist it. This is why you asked for it to end quickly. This is why you wondered if you had done something wrong. But Ibn Arabi reminds us that Allah does not rush refinement. He completes it. If this phase had ended sooner, you would have carried unfinished attachments forward. If it had ended later, it would have delayed what is already written for you. So it lasted exactly as long as it needed to. This is difficult to accept because it removes the comfort of randomness. It tells you that what happened was not accidental. It was intentional. But that intention was not cruelty. It was preparation. You were being adjusted internally to match what is approaching externally. And that is why this phase changed you in ways you could not reverse. You cannot unsee what you saw. You cannot return to who you were before it. You cannot pretend it didn't matter, because it mattered. It mattered enough for Allah to slow you down. It mattered enough for Allah to strip distractions away. It mattered enough for Allah to rewrite you quietly rather than break you publicly. This phase was necessary because the next one requires clarity without arrogance, strength without ego, and trust without illusion. And that kind of readiness does not come gently. It comes precisely. 5. Allah rewrites before He reveals. One of the hardest truths to accept is this: Allah almost never shows you what is coming while He is still preparing you for it. You wanted answers. You wanted signs. You wanted reassurance that all of this pain was leading somewhere meaningful. But what you received instead was silence. That silence felt cruel. It felt unnecessary. It felt like abandonment. And yet, according to Ibn Arabi, this silence is not absence. It is protection. Ibn Arabi teaches that Allah does not reveal a station to a servant until the servant can carry it without corruption. Revelation before readiness would not be mercy. It would be burden. So Allah rewrites first. He changes how you see. He changes how you react. He changes what you rely on. Only after that does He unveil what was written for you all along. This is why you were kept in the dark. If you had known what was coming, you would have rushed toward it with impatience. You would have measured your worth by how close or far you felt from it. You would have tried to control the outcome instead of becoming worthy of it. So Allah removed foresight and replaced it with refinement. This is what made the waiting unbearable. You weren't just waiting for events to change. You were waiting for meaning to arrive. But Ibn Arabi explains that meaning does not arrive as information. It arrives as capacity. And capacity is built quietly, invisibly, often painfully. Allah was expanding your inner container. That expansion felt like emptiness because what used to fill you no longer could. Old comforts stopped working. Old affirmations felt shallow. Old assurances no longer satisfied you. This wasn't regression, it was depth. You were no longer comforted by surface-level hope. You needed something truer, something steadier, something that didn't depend on outcomes. So Allah delayed the reveal. He wanted you anchored, not excited, rooted, not impatient, grounded, not dependent on signs. This is why the delay felt personal. You felt overlooked because your ego wanted confirmation, but your soul was being trained to move without applause. Ibn Arabi speaks about this moment with unsettling clarity. He says that Allah hides the gift so the servant does not confuse the gift with the giver. If the reveal comes too early, attachment shifts away from Allah and toward the blessing itself. So Allah rewrites desire before He grants fulfillment. He teaches you how to want without clinging, how to hope without demanding, how to trust without conditions. This is not easy. It dismantles the part of you that negotiates with faith, the part that says, "I'll trust you if I see progress." That part cannot survive what you are being prepared for, so Allah silenced it. That is why clarity did not come when you begged for it. That is why answers did not arrive when you searched desperately. That is why reassurance felt distant. Allah was not withholding out of neglect. He was guarding the outcome from your unreadiness. When the rewriting is complete, the reveal will feel natural. It will not shock you. It will not overwhelm you. It will feel like something you have already become compatible with. And that is the sign that the delay was mercy. You are not being ignored. You are being shaped. And what is being shaped does not need explanation while it is still forming. 6. You felt weak because your ego was being quieted. There is a moment in spiritual transformation that feels almost unbearable. It is not when life collapses outwardly. It is when strength begins to feel unfamiliar. When the fire that once drove you dims. When confidence no longer rises on command. When ambition goes silent. You looked at yourself and wondered, why do I feel smaller? Why do I hesitate now? Why don't I feel powerful like before? And the most frightening thought crossed your mind. Am I losing something essential? According to Ibn Arabi, this sensation does not appear when a person is weakening. It appears when the ego is being quieted so the soul can be heard. The ego equates loudness with strength. The soul equates stillness with truth. When Allah intends to elevate someone inwardly, He does not inflate them. He reduces them. He removes the inner noise that once convinced them they were strong on their own. That reduction feels like loss. You were used to moving through life with a certain momentum, a certain certainty, a sense of control that made decisions feel sharp and reactions immediate. When that momentum disappeared, you mistook the absence of force for the absence of strength. But Ibn Arabi teaches that force and strength are not the same thing. Force comes from the ego. Strength comes from alignment. The ego pushes. The soul allows. What you felt was not weakness. It was the collapse of false power. Allah was removing the part of you that needed to dominate outcomes, to control timing, to assert identity through action. That part of you had served a purpose once, but it could not carry what is coming next. So Allah softened it. Softening feels humiliating to the ego. It feels like vulnerability. It feels like exposure. It feels like being stripped of armor, and that terrified you. You felt slower in your responses. You felt hesitant where you once were decisive. You felt quieter in rooms where you once took space. But notice something important. You did not become careless. You did not become irresponsible. You did not become passive. You became deliberate. Ibn Arabi explains that when Allah quiets the ego, He sharpens perception. The servant stops acting from impulse and starts acting from awareness. But awareness feels heavy at first because it carries responsibility. You were no longer reacting blindly. You were seeing consequences. You were noticing intention. You were sensing weight. That awareness made you cautious. And caution felt like weakness to a world that worships speed. But Allah does not value speed. He values precision. This is why you stopped chasing. This is why you questioned impulses that once felt natural. This is why ambition no longer thrilled you the way it used to. Your ego was losing its throne, and that loss felt like death. Ibn Arabi speaks openly about this stage. He says the ego experiences its reduction as annihilation, while the soul experiences it as liberation. Both experiences happen at the same time, but which one you feel depends on where your identity was rooted. If your identity was tied to achievement, you felt hollow. If it was tied to recognition, you felt invisible. If it was tied to control, you felt powerless. But beneath that discomfort, something else was growing. A greater strength, a steadier presence, a patience that did not depend on reward. You began to notice that you no longer needed to announce yourself. You no longer needed to prove your understanding. You no longer needed to respond to every challenge. That is not weakness. That is restraint. and restraint is one of the highest forms of strength. Allah was teaching you how to move without egoic urgency, how to wait without resentment, how to stand without display. This is why this phase isolated you emotionally. Ego thrives in comparison. When comparison disappears, ego starves. So Allah reduced the environments that fed it. This felt like loneliness. But loneliness was the cost of clarity. You were learning how to exist without external reinforcement, how to trust inner alignment more than outer validation, how to act because something is true, not because it is impressive. That shift cannot happen without the ego being quieted, and quieting is not gentle. It feels like you are shrinking, when in reality, you are condensing, like pressure, turning carbon into diamond. The volume decreases, but the density increases. This is why you are more selective now, why you speak less but mean more, why you move slower but with intention. You did not lose power, you lost noise, and noise was never strength to begin with. Ibn Arabi would say that Allah does not weaken the servant He is preparing. He removes the servant's reliance on everything that is not Allah. That removal feels terrifying, because it leaves you standing with nothing but trust. And trust feels fragile until you realize it does not break. You felt weak because the old source of your strength was taken away, but a new source was being installed. One that does not depend on circumstances. One that does not collapse under uncertainty. One that does not need to be seen to be real. This phase stripped you of borrowed strength so you could learn what real strength feels like. Quiet, grounded, unshakable. The new version of you could not exist without this phase. There is a truth that only becomes visible when a chapter has fully closed. And that truth is this: the version of you that is emerging now could not have existed without everything that preceded it. Not one loss, not one delay, not one moment of silence was extra. According to Ibn Arabi, creation does not move forward in straight lines. It unfolds through refinement, and refinement always requires subtraction before revelation. You could not have carried this new awareness with the old attachments still intact. You could not have held this depth while still relying on noise, validation, or control. Something had to be removed, so something truer could take its place. That is why returning to who you were is no longer possible, even if part of you sometimes wishes it were. You have seen too much. You have felt too deeply. You have been emptied in ways that cannot be reversed. Ibn Arabi teaches that once the soul passes through a genuine transformation, regression is not an option, because consciousness cannot unsee what it has already understood. This is why comfort feels different now. This is why shallow answers no longer satisfy you. This is why your patience has changed shape. You are no longer waiting for things to improve the way you once did. You are waiting with awareness rather than desperation. That shift did not come gently. It was earned through pressure, confusion, and surrender. The old version of you needed certainty, reassurance, movement, and outcomes to feel alive. This new version can remain present even when outcomes are hidden. That is not loss. That is capacity. You were prepared for this by being slowed, quieted, and stripped of illusions that once made life feel manageable but fragile. If you had stepped into what comes next without this preparation, it would have overwhelmed you. You would have carried ego into responsibility, impatience into purpose, and fear into trust. So Allah intervened, not to punish, but to protect. This phase was not about survival. It was about compatibility. Destiny is not granted based on desire alone. It is revealed when the inner structure matches the weight of what is written. You were not delayed because you were unworthy. You were delayed because you were being fortified. Every moment you felt invisible was a moment your reliance on visibility was weakening. Every moment you felt uncertain was a moment your dependence on control was dissolving. Every moment you felt alone was a moment your attachment to external reinforcement was loosening. These were not signs of abandonment. They were signs of refinement. Ibn Arabi explains that Allah does not elevate the servant by lifting them upward suddenly. He deepens them first. Depth creates stability. Stability allows elevation without collapse. That is why this process happened internally before anything changed externally. You were being trained to hold presence without reward, patience without clarity, and trust without evidence. Those qualities cannot be taught through ease. They must be lived through absence. This is why your faith feels different now. It is quieter, but stronger. Less performative, but more sincere. Less dependent on answers, but more anchored in trust. The version of you that is emerging no longer needs life to make sense in order to remain faithful. That is not resignation. That is maturity. You were not meant to carry this next chapter as someone who needs constant confirmation. You were meant to carry it as someone who understands that meaning does not always arrive immediately, but it always arrives precisely. If you are honest, you already know this phase changed you in irreversible ways. You are more discerning, more patient, more grounded, less reactive, less impressed by appearances, less shaken by uncertainty. These are not small changes. These are structural changes. They form the foundation of the next chapter. And that is why this phase could not be skipped. It was not a detour. It was the path. You were not circling aimlessly. You were being shaped intentionally. Allah did not rewrite you so you could return to the same life with more tolerance. He rewrote you so you could step into a different way of being altogether. One that does not break under pressure. One that does not collapse in silence. One that does not demand immediate reward to remain faithful. You are not at the end. You are at the threshold. And the reason you can stand here now without fear is because you were prepared slowly, quietly, and thoroughly. This phase did not damage you. It completed you. And the clearest sign that it worked is this. Even though you do not yet see everything that is coming, you trust Allah more deeply than you did before. You are no longer asking to go back. You are ready to move forward without needing to know every step. That readiness is not accidental. It was built carefully, intentionally, necessarily. You did not break. This was necessary. And now, the rewriting is complete enough for the next chapter to begin. If this message reached you, it wasn't by accident. You were meant to hear this now, at this point in your journey, when you no longer see everything clearly, but trust more deeply than before. You did not break. You were not abandoned, and nothing about this phase was wasted. According to Ibn Arabi, Allah does not tear down what He intends to elevate. He refines it until it can stand without fear. What felt like loss was removal. What felt like silence was preparation. And what felt like delay was protection. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are becoming. So do not rush what Allah is completing. Do not judge this season by how heavy it felt. Judge it by how deeply it changed you. Because when the next chapter opens, you will understand why this one had to unfold exactly as it did. You did not break. This was necessary. And now, you are ready to move forward quietly, steadily, and with trust. Stay patient, stay grounded, and let Allah finish what He has already begun.